Wait. There's another long snapper? They brought in another long snapper. There's two of them now. Christian Kuntz has competition. We will address this today. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, preparing for a really big, special, important episode of Daily Shot of Steelers that comes your way bright and early every weekday. I don't know how much longer I can keep a straight face here. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. You know, I almost made that stuff the title, but then, you know, it just kills the algorithm. Nobody would open it, and, you know, business and that. Minkah Fitzpatrick was traded to the Dolphins for Jalen Warren and Jonnu Smith, in addition to a small swap of late-round draft picks. And to put this plainly, there's nothing that I don't like about this. I don't mean to sound even remotely disrespectful to Minkah Fitzpatrick, who he is, what he's been, in particular what he was from 2019 to 22, inarguably, in my view, the premier safety in the National Football League. But times change, performances change, needs change. And my friends, you can check off all three of those boxes when it comes to this remarkable transaction. Minkah's a $20 million a year cap hit who was not at all meriting that cap hit. You can place the blame anywhere you choose. My own version of this is that it's something of a mix. Minkah's absolutely come down from his career highs, and Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, and everybody else moved him a zillion yards off the line of scrimmage. Which one's the chicken, which one's the egg, doesn't matter at this point. It wasn't working. Certainly not at a $20 million price tag. I would say that the foundation of this trade is all pro for all pro. Minkah, 28 years old, turning 29 in November. Ramsey, 30 years old, turning 31 in October. So there's something of an age difference there. It's not enormous. There's something of a difference in the resumes, but that's also not enormous, not in either direction. But then there's Jonnu Smith, who's coming off a career season with the Dolphins. He was the fourth leading receiver among all NFL tight ends in 2024. 88 catches, 883 yards, 10 touchdowns, and sit down for this one. But 55 of his 88 catches resulted in first downs. That's mind-blowing. And doubly so when you look at the struggles that the Dolphins had at the quarterback position, plus that Smith also ended up being the Dolphins' leading receiver, meaning receiver at any position. So when Miami really needed to get a first down, the defenses knew where the ball was going and still couldn't stop it. To me, if you want to attempt to break down, analyze, or grade this trade in some form, it begins and ends there. It begins and ends with all pro for all pro, and then, oh, by the way, here's Jonnu Smith. But I'll take it further anyway from the Pittsburgh perspective, and purely from the Pittsburgh perspective. What was the one area of need on the defensive side of the ball that we'd been discussing on this program for weeks and months? Well, need might have been too strong, but the position that it would come up would be slot corner. They didn't really know who the slot corner was going to be, and it sure sounded like Mike Tomlin wasn't sold on Beanie Bishop. Well, okay, here's Ramsey, who is tremendous at the slot corner position. And if you happen to need help on the outside for whatever reason, you don't have Darius Slay, you don't have Joey Porter, you don't get the kind of play that you want out of one or the other, that's a pretty nice option to have in the back pocket. There's addressing a need, and then there's sledgehammering it. That's what this was. On the other side, you look at tight end, you already had Pat Freiermuth, you already had Darnell Washington. Hopes were raised a little bit by some things that we reported from OTAs and minicamp regarding Darnell, but you still had a missing set of targets in the Arthur Smith offense that were designated to go to Donald Parham, who's now lost for the season with the Achilles tear. So it's convenient to think, all right, we'll just go get another Parham-type guy, bring Michael Pruitt back, get Connor Hayward more involved. No. Here again, there's addressing a need, and there's sledgehammering a need. This was Omar Khan going all Thor on the process, not once, but twice. And if you want to argue that, okay, well, maybe the Steelers now have a need at free safety. Who's going to do that? It's Juan Thornhill, and Thornhill was added as a free agent, very low profile. A lot of people are going to know his name now, but they wouldn't have before. And he came from Cleveland with the reputation as a center field type safety. Well, that's what he'll be filling. That's what he would have done, maybe in a reserve role, had Micah still been here. Now, Thornhill wasn't exactly a hit with the barking citizens of Cleveland in his 2 years there, in large part because of a lingering calf injury. And calf injuries, for those who don't know, do tend to linger. That's how and why the Steelers were able to sign Thornhill as a free agent for the vet minimum. Do you still need to get somebody? You have to make sure that Deshaun Elliott stays close to the line of scrimmage, so it's obviously not going to be him. That's a call that the Steelers will have to make between now and the 7th of September. But I'll live with that. I'll live with somebody that I don't really know all that much about at a position that I really didn't notice all that much over the past 2 years, for better or worse. And I will trade that, as in actually trade that, for impact at slot corner, for impact at tight end. Because if I get impact at slot corner, and I get the kind of play that I'm expecting out of both Slay and Porter, I shouldn't even know the name of that deep safety. If I'm getting impact out of Jonnu Smith and Freiermuth and Washington, yeah, I still want a WR2, but I'm not ready to throw myself in front of a moving locomotive to get a true WR2, as in some star guy to theoretically replace George Pickens' talent. This was a step forward, really 2 steps forward. One on defense, one on offense. It's also, and I really want to make this point before the break, yet another cementing of the seriousness with which management, beginning with you-know-who, is approaching the 2025 NFL season. That's not a small thing in the football culture. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from JC Sheridan, who says, "Good Tuesday morning, DK. I think it's obvious, I think you would agree, that Mike Tomlin is all in on this year. It's starting to feel like a last hurrah for the head coach. Are you getting that impression as well?" You know, I am, JC, and I'm reluctant to state it in any sort of solid form because I don't have anything to substantiate it. I've heard from former players that there have been times over the years, even farther back than you might imagine, where he's contemplated what to do next in his coaching career or in life, but he's obviously never acted upon it. He's still doing exactly what he's done since 2007. But we're now deep into his second decade, doing the same job, and just simple human nature or harsh reality would dictate that change does eventually come. He's not going to be doing this for all eternity. But the other point, and the one that really leaps out at me, comes from this quote. It was April 26. Tomlin was on NFL Network, and he was asked, I don't know how the subject came up. I don't recall the whole thing, but he was asked why he was convinced, or when he became convinced, that the Steelers needed to become bigger and more physical. The quote was, "I doubt that I had even gotten in the shower yet," end quote. And he was referring to the shower in Baltimore after the playoff loss, after the 299 yards. Hadn't gotten in the shower yet. He doesn't often peel back the curtain, to borrow one of his pet terms, to anywhere near that extent. That's as close as you'll come to getting from that man a bearing of his football soul. Because there's nothing about that entire scenario that could have been more embarrassing than losing out over your final 5 games, of losing the way they did, the most un-Steelers-like way possible, by getting trampled, by getting steamrollered. And then, on top of everything else, to lose there and to lose to that coaching staff and to get so very obviously out-coached. Sometimes people say that just in a cynical tone and don't have anything to back it up. There are volumes to back this one up. So, as I'm always telling you, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Well, look at what they've done. Got sick of Najee Harris, gone. In comes Caleb Johnson. Got sick of George Pickens, gone. In comes DK Metcalf for $150 million. Both of those are pretty un-Steelers-like moves, huh? Wasn't satisfied with the quarterback situation? People like me can complain about it, but Tomlin spent months chasing around the 4-time MVP and eventually coaxed him to come here. Other guys gone, entirely new quarterback room from 1 through 4. Whatever it was that the Steelers saw that made them feel Minkah Fitzpatrick was expendable, whether it was losing a step, whether it was the miscommunication that players were talking about endlessly throughout the season on the back end, whatever it was, and I'm at least going to say this one in a respectful tone, gone. In comes Jalen Ramsey. I'm going to say that one again because that really hasn't sunk in yet for me. Jalen Ramsey. Not enough tight ends to really make the Arthur Smith offense go. Well, nobody was really gone on this one unless you want to count poor Donald Parham getting hurt. But in comes one of the most productive handful of tight ends in the league in Jonnu Smith. These aren't moves that are either made or approved, or however it is that you happen to view Tomlin's role in the Steelers hierarchy, by someone who's sitting there daydreaming about 2026 or 2027 or what life might be like 3-4 years from now when Will Howard is leading the franchise to the next wave of glory. These are things that would have been, in most cases, not all of them, resisted, I believe. Why? Because they haven't been commonplace in the past. Yeah, is he feeling something, JC? Yeah, I would say so. I appreciate the question. Terrific one. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers, and I swear we will get around to the long snapper episode someday. Might even have Christian Kuntz come on. Let's do it again tomorrow.